Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Laura, Author Engagement Manager at Kobo Writing Life.
And I'm Rachel, also Author Engagement Manager at Kobo Writing Life.
Today we spoke with author Malorie Cooper. Mal has been a full-time author since 2017 and is a New York Times bestselling author. Together with her wife Jill, Mal has hit and maintained 5-figure income per month, and their fiction has brought in over $1.75 million in fiction revenue. They've built their marketing firm, The Writing Wives, to teach authors how to sell more books and earn more money. They provide classes, consulting, and coaching videos, and are the authors of the popular Help My Facebook Ads Suck book. Today we spoke to Mal all about her insights into the world of Facebook ads and marketing, and she gave us so much advice for authors who are looking to tackle the world of marketing on their own. She also talked to us about her publishing journey, writing in an expanded universe, and why she loves to work with authors. Rachel and Mal also nerded out over their mutual love of science fiction and the Firefly universe. It's a great episode with so much valuable information, so we hope you enjoy.
Okay, we are joined today by Malorie Cooper, who writes fiction under MD Cooper. Malorie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just to kick things off, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. So I'm Malorie Cooper, and like you said, I write fiction under MD Cooper, specifically sci-fi, space opera, military sci-fi, and just about everything in that realm. I publish that under MD Cooper, and I create a universe called Aeon 14, which has 127 books in it now. And then on the nonfiction side, I got into helping authors with Facebook ads after I had a lot of success doing it. And people would be saying, like, Facebook ads don't work. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm making, over $20,000 a month from running Facebook ads. So I think they do work. And so I got into teaching authors how to do that. And it sort of has turned into its own separate career and separate business now as well. So kind of do all the things having to do with writing.
That's incredible. And we definitely want to talk about the Facebook ads and the marketing side of your career. But
sure.
I'm sorry, you said over 140 books in your universe?
127.
127. Okay. I mean,
yeah,
still wildly impressive. Now, is this a universe that you've opened up to other people to create, or have you personally written all of those books?
I have co-authors I've worked with, 7 of them, one of them being my wife. And so about 60% of the books are solo mine, and then 40% with co-authors. But co-authors, I actually find, because it's one big massive universe and I'm really big on continuity, they don't actually speed things up. It actually usually takes me longer to do a book with a co-author, but they do bring new ideas. Because when I decided I wanted to write a massive universe, I'm like, I don't have enough life experience to portray this massive group of this massive cast of characters accurately. I need other people to come into the mix and bring their storytelling and their ideas and their characters. So I'm really glad I did, because I think it's much richer for having done that.
And when you have a universe that large, do you have kind of like a universe Bible, because you said continuity is so important, or is everything you just have the memory of?
I wish I had a universe Bible. If you're going to try to make a big universe out there and you're listening to the sound of my voice, make a Bible early on. Don't think you'll do it later, because it'll get harder and harder the longer you wait. So yeah, most of it is in my head, but luckily in my books, every single chapter starts with a date and a location. So it makes it a little bit easier to research my books. And I've also got like an amazing fandom now where I can just say to my fans, like, hey, between this point and this point, did they ever go here? Or did this person know about this thing or something like that? And my fans will tell me too. So they're like my AI that I can just ask questions.
I've heard that from a couple authors now, and I love that readers have become like fact checkers for authors, and they probably love it too. Like they're like, yes, this is the encyclopedic like knowledge that I've acquired. That's awesome.
Yeah, and they've made a TV tropes page for my series, and they've also made like I forget which fan, I think it might be Fandom, that they use to also make like a wiki for my series as well. They're not complete, but they're also just some other places where there's info. So it's pretty handy.
That is so
handy. It is cool how the fans just like want to become a part of the whole thing and are eager to help. I love it.
What is it like co-writing with your wife? Is that a challenge, or is it something that just brings you closer together? Because I imagine it can go one of two ways.
I wouldn't say it brings us closer together. So my wife and I, we've been married for 27 years now. So we've been around each other for quite a while, and we kind of know how to work with each other. We've actually worked with each other for a lot of those 27 years as well. So I think without a lot of our life experience together, it probably could have actually gone pretty badly. But one of the sort of advantages is that when we started, I'm like, okay, this is my universe, and other people are also writing in it, and I'm of course reading everything they write. So I'm kind of the one person who knows how everything has to fit together. So I did this with all my co-authors as well. I established that I'm sort of the final say on how everything works, and that kind of helped in a way because at a certain point I would just say to Jill, like, this is what we're going to do with this because it has to be that way, and she was like, okay, that's fine. She didn't. It's whenever you're working with co-authors, and especially one that you're married to, you have to like sort of like understand how to let someone have ownership over a thing but still operate within guidelines. And that's actually true for anything in business, right? If you hire people or you have people working for you, you want them to feel ownership over the thing they're working on, because then they're going to put their all into it. And if they feel like they're just like doing what they're told and not allowed to have any creativity, then they'll produce an inferior product. So I always really want to make those people felt a lot of really strong ownership. And very rarely would I just sort of like come in and stomp all over what they're doing and change it. Only if I had to, for like story continuity reasons, would I do that. But otherwise, I kind of let people do their own thing. And I've learned too that like just because someone does something different than you doesn't mean it's worse than the way you would do it. It can be different and just as good or different and better. And I always want to let people like sort of have the freedom to create something that could be amazing that I would never have thought of.
Can you tell us a little about your publishing journey, and at what point did you realize you learned so much about the indie author world and ads and marketing that you wanted to share it with others?
Sure. Before I wrote books, I was a software engineer and I worked on a lot of really big projects. So I've always had a really good technical background. So, and a lot of indie publishing does involve like understanding the nuts and bolts of how books are put together and how they're converted into EPUBs and how to work with advertising platforms. And the more you understand about the stuff behind that, the easier it is to work with. And like other things, like I realized the other day, I've now been using Photoshop for 30 years, like twice the lifetime of my daughter. I've been using this one piece of software for. And it's still unfathomably complex in ways it doesn't need to be, just like it always has been. Yeah, so when I started writing, I used to write fantasy because I started writing when I read Lord of the Rings and then I didn't want it to end. So I started writing what now would be considered just really bad teenage Lord of the Rings fanfic. And I tried then to write my own fantasy stories and make things happen from there. So I've always been into sci-fi. I was mentioning to Rachel before the call that my first fiction experience, my first time I ever experienced fiction, my first time I ever experienced movies, and the first time I ever experienced science fiction were all the same event when I saw Return of the Jedi at 5 years old in the theater at the front row with my 5-year-old brain just screaming this the entire time. And so I've always loved sci-fi, but I never felt like I could do it well enough because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And I figured I would need like a PhD in astrophysics to actually write sci-fi as well as I want to write it. But then I saw Firefly. There's a Firefly and then the Serenity movie. And Jill and I actually got to see Serenity twice when it was in pre-release. Even like the first time we saw it, it hadn't been lit. It didn't have music, or anything like that. So we just like, it was really cool to see all the different versions of that movie as it came out. Rachel just looks like she's in a rapture here now.
I was gonna say, I feel like I need to say that Rachel is totally having a fangirl moment here right now. Rachel loves Firefly, so
Yeah,
as soon as you mentioned that, her face lit up.
So I thought to myself, what if it was a ship like Firefly? It was like, because Firefly is like the A-Team, right? Like the old TV series, the A-Team. You get this band of people who have each other's backs no matter what. They might bicker. You might have to drug Mr. T to get him on the plane or something like that. And you might hit Murdoch a few times. But at the end of the day, if Murdoch needs help or if Mr. T needs help, the other one's going to come and save them no matter what. And Firefly had that vibe. It had that found family. These people are always going to have your back vibe with a little bit of Joss Whedon drama thrown in there, as he likes to do. But I thought to myself, what if it was a ship like that, but instead like someone like Inara was the captain instead of Mal, and so I wrote a series that started out like that. It had this woman named Sarah, who was the captain of a starship, and she had like this motley crew of people who always had each other's backs and whatnot. And it was this awesome story. At that point, it was called a ship named Sabrina, which is still the ship's name. Sabrina, the ship also has an AI whose name is Sabrina. She hates it if you call the ship the Sabrina because she's like, I am not the Sabrina. So it's like the only ship in my entire universe where they won't say like the, whatever the ship name is. They just say Sabrina. And she's neurotic and will get really upset if like her crew is not on her for any length of time or stuff like that. So she's a ton of fun. But they ended up encountering this lost colony ship, and through these various hijinks, they managed to help that lost colony ship get away from everybody that was after it. So then I went to write the second book, started doing that, and I started querying that first book. At that time, I think this was like 2008. It was right after like the crash that happened in 2008, and the publishing houses basically weren't taking anyone new at that point. And like I was querying agents, and I finally got an agent to ask for my entire manuscript, and then I didn't hear from them for 7 months. And then they said, finally I got a hold of them, and they're like, yeah, we decided it's not for us. And I'm like, I'm going to be dead before I like managed to get a series published and written. But that was before KDP came out. There was no Kindle yet or anything. So I thought, well, what if I just write more books? So I have a longer series. It's going to convince them I can do it. I'm not a flash in the pan. And I started writing the second book. And then I realized I don't know enough about the colony ship characters that they encountered to write the second book. So I went back. I'm going to be smart. I'm not going to pull a George Lucas. I'm going to write the first 3 books ahead of time and publish them first and do it properly in order. And so I did that. And first I thought it was only be 1 book, but then it turned into a trilogy. And that came around at that point. It was 2012. Still hadn't gotten anywhere with querying or agents or publishing or anything like that. And so my wife Jill had just self-published a book on Kindle, and she's like, "Why don't you self-publish your book?" And so I made my own cover. It was terrible because I'm like, I want to make a cover for the way the books looked like in the 60s, be all retro and everything like that. Bad plan, didn't work. But I published the book, and that kind of just started it for me, though, because once I started getting fan interactions and people writing me and telling me they read my book, it was like, I don't want to like go back to like this grind of like not writing books that no one ever sees. I want to write books that people see and read. And so it went from there. And over the next, I learned a lot about like how I'm not nearly as good a writer as I thought I was without an editor there to save me. I kept thinking, I remember the first like maybe like 6 or 7 books I wrote, I'm like, this is the one the editor is going to send it back and be like, there was almost nothing wrong with this book. I was like, this is the time I do it. And I just produce a perfect book the first time. Turns out that's not possible. And I sort of accept the fact that I'm always going to get thousands of things back from an editor, that need to be fixed in a given book. I've discovered that for the life of me, I cannot place a comma. I think I place commas like I'm reading the text like I'm James T. Kirk and just pausing everywhere, because they're like, put a comma where you would naturally pause. And I think I read my books like Captain Kirk in my head, and so there's way too many commas. But be that as it may, in June of 2016, I published my third book. Finally got it out, and at that point, Jill started running Facebook ads for my books, because that was sort of like becoming a thing authors were trying out. And we went from selling maybe $500 worth of books in like May of that year to in November doing $25,000 in 1 month. So we kind of realized like, hey, this Facebook ad thing kind of works. And that became like a mainstay of what we do. And then everything kind of rolled on from there. I could keep talking, but you probably have more questions. So I should stop so you can say things too.
I literally could sit here and talk to you about sci-fi and Firefly and Serenity for the rest of the day, not even for the rest of this podcast, just the day. But unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, that's not why we're here.
I think it's unfortunate, actually.
Thank you. So do I. Laura might disagree, but you've alluded to the fact that you and your wife have worked closely together in co-writing, and you also run a business together, the Writing Wives. Can you tell us a little bit about your business and what services you offer authors?
Sure, yeah. So I think around 2019, I talked at a lot of conventions about Facebook ads, just sort of saying like, hey, you can do this too, kind of stuff for authors. And in 2019, after the 20 Books conference, people were like, 90 minutes is not long enough to learn what we need. Because I didn't have 90 minutes. I sold 60-minute sessions. Like 60 minutes is not long enough to learn what we need to know to run Facebook ads. And they asked if I could run like a webinar. And so another author helped put it together, because I was kind of like, sounds like work. I'm not sure if I want to do it. I'd rather be writing. And I think we got like a few hundred people that all signed up at $50 a pop to come to this webinar and learn things. And then after that, people were like, when's the next one is happening? And it kind of just from there slowly became a thing where I started doing more and more webinars, teaching people how to do various things around advertising. And then I branched out, because a lot of times people would come with a book and they'd be like, I can't get my Facebook ads to work for this book. And I'm like, yeah, it's not your Facebook ads. It's your product page on Amazon. It's your blurb, it's your cover, it's your title. that's not working. Your book is about these things, but your cover says these other genre and tropes. They're not lined up with each other. So over time, we branched out into doing blurb doctoring, into helping people with covers. For long, I don't do a lot of my own cover art, but I've done most of my own cover typography. So at this point, I've probably done typography on about 300 book covers. I've designed probably around like 60 or 70 book covers at this point. I've probably written about 500 blurbs. So I've done a lot of just sort of the book publishing stuff, just in helping people get their books to a point where they're marketable. And so over time, we sort of started building all those different offerings into what we do as the Writing Wives. And now we focus very heavily on the marketing side of things, but for some authors, are involved in almost every part of their publishing journey, just sort of helping them with how do they format their books, what should they be focused on from a market research standpoint for their next book, all the way down to what's the next reel that we should be making for a Facebook ad. So it's sort of ballooned into everything. The bulk of it, though, is consulting with Facebook ads, and then another service we have where we just run people's Facebook ads for them, because some people are like, you're really good at Facebook ads and I'm busy, I don't want to learn about them, so just do it for me. So we do that as well. And then we also do AMS ads too, so we kind of get into just about everything at this point.
So it seems like you said, you do a little bit of everything. How do you balance your own publishing and writing alongside helping all these other authors with their business?
Oh, I don't.
I appreciate the honesty there.
Yeah. I've come to the conclusion at this stage of my life that balance is a myth. I seem to just like I'm a metronome. I'm just like going from one side to the other constantly. Like I can focus on my business and I can focus on my writing, but then I ignore my business and I focus on my business. So I've kind of just learned that I'm never going to reach a point where I can somehow juggle everything flawlessly. And so I sort of just make time in my yearly calendar to have periods where I can get more writing done or more creative work done. And sometimes I just sort of have to accept that if the business is going well, the Writing Wise business is going well, which over time has made more money. And part of it's because it's the tyranny of the urgent, right? Whatever's the most urgent is the thing that gets the most attention. And usually that's going to be, if we can bring on an author, and start working on their ads, and we're talking thousands of dollars a month, perhaps in that agreement, that's money right now that's more profitable than writing in many cases, especially once I have this massive backlist that just sort of makes money on its own. I haven't released a book in 3 years and I'm still a 5-figure author by just having this large backlist that I keep advertising. So for about the last 2 years, the Writing Wives side of things has kind of taken over. I still am working on some books, and honestly, it's nice that I don't have to be on the treadmill. I can take time and write the books I want, the way I want, and go over them again or tweak them and maybe build up a bit of an unpublished stable of books. I've been able to join a bunch of anthologies and just do some short stories as they fit in. But this summer, I'm going to be getting a lot more writing done because I've sort of booked off almost the entire summer from doing consulting work, so I can get back to writing and spend time in the garden and just enjoying life a little more. Because if I let myself, I'll work 80 hours a week. So I'm one of those people that just oh, I could do more work. I'm alive. I'm awake. Why am I not doing things? So Jill's like, this is going to be your summer of fun where you just relax. And she put it in my calendar and just blocked off the whole summer for me. So that actually starts next week, where I almost have where I'm just can focus on my own creativity and just sort of enjoying life a bit.
Good for you for the scheduled vacation, though. Sometimes that is highly necessary.
Yeah, it totally is.
On your website, you mentioned the importance of discoverability for authors. And I'm really curious, what are some ways that authors can increase their visibility and find readers on different retailers?
I think the biggest thing is that, and I'm sure you guys know this, and I think most authors know this too, that there's a lot of books out there now, more than there ever have been. And unlike other products, books never go away. If you, for example, Chevy is not selling brand new 2019 cars anymore, but you can buy every book that was published in 2019, maybe barring a few that might have been unpublished for some reason, And so the number of books that are available just keeps growing all the time, which means that all authors are going to find themselves fighting more and more to get eyeballs on their books. It's sort of just the nature of the beast. And long term, I don't know what that means. But short term, but I guess the way that everything works, and this works kind of like this with all products, is that you need, the people selling the products and the people marketing the products are just generally more interested in new products because they have that one selling point that everything else doesn't have, and that's that they're new. And people are kind of like that, right? Like if you're like, hey, do you want to watch this new Netflix series, or do you want to watch a Netflix series from 15 years ago? If they even did 6 series 15 years ago, most people are like, ooh, what's the new thing, right? Like new is just appealing in and of itself. Do you want to wear the new pair of mom jeans that look like the 1990s, or do you want to dig an old pair of mom jeans out of your closet from the 1990s? People are like, oh, let's try the new ones. We're kind of weird that way. We're wired to be interested in new things. So that's one thing, is you just sort of you keep putting out new books. And the old adage is always like, if you're unsure of what to do, write the next book. And the best advertisement for your backlist is the next book, because it's going to get eyeballs on it. People are going to be interested in what you do, and that will bring up your whole backlist. When I was publishing a lot, I found that for myself, a new release was worth about the same thing as a $3,000 worth of advertising. And some authors it's worth more, some authors it's worth less. It kind of depends on how many books you have. I was working with an author the other day. We calculated, and every time that she did a new release, it gave her entire backlist the same bump as $10,000 worth of advertising. So it became very apparent to her that it was definitely worth it to write the next book. But advertising isn't the only way that you can build awareness. And it really depends on where you are in your career. When you're first starting out, paid advertising may not be the best thing to do at all. What you should really be focused on is getting a few books out there, doing things like producing a reader magnet, and getting that reader magnet, which should be a complete story. It should not be a prelude or a prologue or the first couple chapters. It should be like a 10,000 to 15,000 word story that encapsulates your major tropes and genre cues, and then you put it out there for free. And it's your way of saying to readers, like, hey, I can do the thing that you want. I can give you the feels that you want when you read this particular genre. And that reader magnet is a great thing to do. And you get that in anthologies, you do newsletter shares and stuff like that. And sure, a newsletter share is not going to do the same thing as $1,000 worth of advertising, but it has the benefit of being free, which is pretty good. And I think that's always the best way to start, is just like leveraging your other authors around you. Is your mailing list only 1,000 people? Do 10 newsletter swaps, and now you've reached potentially 100,000 people through the power of other people's mailing lists. Also, I used to be a lot more into KU than I am now. KU has some advantages, but wide, I feel like, is going to become more and more the way to go. Now that Shopify exists as a way for authors to sell books, or direct sales through whatever else you're doing, it seems the hold, I think, that KU has over authors is breaking, because you can make a lot of money on your own site, but that generally works better with people who know you. And then you use all of the retailers that are out there as a way to improve your discoverability by getting on, I actually think you should be direct with Kobo, with Apple, with Barnes and Noble, and then probably use Drafted Digital or Publish Drive or something like that for all the other smaller places out there. And that's mainly because there's certain deals that you can only get by being direct with these various publishers. I know you guys make some of your stuff available through D2D, but not everything is available through D2D, right? Okay, you're shaking.
Yeah, we keep some things exclusive just for our authors.
Yeah. I imagine some of that has to do with just it's just easier for you guys to go through it all if it's direct authors and manage it all, and because sometimes there's fees for certain things or discounts and whatnot. It's probably way easier to do all that directly, which makes perfect sense to me. And as an author, on your major retailers, you also maybe want to keep a little bit more of the royalties, which I love. I love Drafted Digital. I think they're some of the best people in the industry, without a doubt, but they do take 10%, So, and then Publish Drive takes a flat fee, but they take that flat fee whether you sell books or not. So no matter who you choose, you're always kind of losing a bit if you go through a distributor for everything. So you should be going direct with some people. And those sort of promos, like what Kobo has, that you guys have, are great ways for low cost ways to get your books in front of more people. Like when you guys have like the free runs that you can do and stuff like that on a book. I've had books on Kobo that would get like several thousand downloads, over a weekend on a free run, and then I would see a noticeable bump on my read through on Kobo after that. And that, sometimes it costs a little bit, sometimes it's free depending on the offer. But that's the sort of thing I think authors should really be looking at early on, is those low cost initiatives. They're going to help you get yourself in front of more people. And then later on, you can work on, running more paid ads and scaling that way. And wow, I talked for a really long time there. Sorry.
No, but it was such helpful advice. And I think all the authors can learn from it for sure. Yeah, one of the things we were going to ask you was what your biggest piece of advice for newer indie authors would be. And I think you answered that. Because like you said, I think a lot of authors are kind of concerned about maybe the cost that they'll have to put into marketing. So I think newsletter swaps and things like that are a great way to, or newsletter magnets as well, are a great way to kind of get their name out there without spending a lot of money that they may not have on ads, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, especially we don't have that many books out yet that you, because a lot of times ads are expensive and you need the read through for the profitability. And if you don't have a lot of books out yet, you won't have that read through. So definitely makes sense to try to do as many low cost things initially as possible. But it just basically either you have to spend money or you have to beat the streets, and you have to decide, which is the right thing to do at the right point of your business.
Is there like a certain number of books you would recommend before you start advertising?
At least 3 in a series, and if you don't have a series, probably at least 5, so you can get enough read through to other books, and that's usually the break-even point. Profitability is going to be around 5 books in a series, or maybe you have 2 series of 3 books each, and then maybe you have like 7 to 10 standalones if they're not in the series, because you need enough to hold people's attention for a bit and to get them to do a solid bit of read through. If you can't get that, unfortunately, ads can get pretty expensive. Because when you're doing paid advertising, you're not just competing against other authors. In fact, you're barely competing against other authors. You're competing against every other company on earth that is running ads. And some of them have very large budgets. I'm in a lot of advertising circles that aren't in the author space, talking to other people who run ads, start seeing what the bigger landscape looks like. And many of them are like, hey, if you can get your cost per click under $2 per click, you're doing great. And authors, we would die at $2 per click. We can support maybe 20 cents per click is what we can handle. So when you start leveling up your spend and trying to reach more people, you start competing against people who are willing to spend way more money. I mean, car car manufacturers will spend $10 to $15 per click, to get a person who's interested in buying a car and has the money to buy the car they're selling. They'll pay that much money for a click. So yeah, you gotta get the books written. I guess kind of what it comes down to. That's the first step.
Now, I know that you are giving us so much advice and information about ads, and we are going to ask more questions about it, but you've also consolidated a lot of your knowledge into a book and several editions of a book called Help My Facebook Ads Suck. And I'm so curious how this book came together and why you decided to publish it like this.
Sure. Yeah. I think it was in 2017. It was in the summer before the first 20 books in Vegas. And I kind of alluded to this earlier. I was in the 20 books of 50K group, and so many people were saying Facebook ads don't work. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure they do. And so what I did is I made 4 PDFs. Actually made 4 big long posts about how to set up Facebook ads and how to make them work. Because I realized people were doing all sorts of crazy, weird things with ads and then wondering why it wasn't working. So I'm like, this is how you do it. Here's a formula that you can use to get started. It's actually gotten more complex since then, but luckily then 4 posts were about enough to do it. And then I combined them together in some PDFs and I offered them for free. But a lot of people were like, I would prefer it if this was on Kindle. Could you just put all this into a book on Kindle and publish it that way? Plus, they were like, I'd like to give you money for this because it's worth it. So I did that. I made the book, and I picked the title "Help My Facebook Ads Suck" because that's literally what a lot of people were typing in various forms into in the various groups I was in on Facebook, and so I just went with it. And I felt like people who needed the book were going to resonate with the title, and they have. I think right now the 3rd edition is out. And I'm actually working on a 4th edition now because enough has been changing over the last year that I need another edition. And actually, my plan for the 4th edition is I'm just going to release it for free, just because I want authors to have good information, and because it's so easy to spend a lot of money on Facebook ads, and there's a lot of bad advice out there, and so I want to try and flood the market with as much good advice as I can. And part of the problem is that a lot of people that are giving this bad advice, it works for them. They're like, for me, for my books, I did this thing and I sold more. But what they don't understand is that there could be elements related to the age groups they're targeting, the genre that they're writing. Some genres appeal to men and women. Some genres appeal to only one of the two. And the tactics that you use with men and women. Unfortunately, Facebook only recognizes those 2 options, but the tactics you use with those are different. In general. And so someone might give advice, very good advice for them, but they don't actually even understand sort of what the bounds of that advice is. And then other people will take that advice. And I've seen people spend $10,000 trying to make what they think should be a winning tactic for them work and have it not work. Just basically just blow that money. And we end up we set up ads a different way that works for their books and their genre and whatnot, and then they make money. And so I want to try and get as good advice out there as much as possible, because a lot of the folks that are doing this, they've only done it for themselves, or maybe they've consulted with maybe 10 or 20 people. So they have this really small pool of knowledge and examples, where at this point we have 5 people now on our ads team, and we've worked with probably over 3,000 or 4,000 authors at this point. with their Facebook ads. We directly and indirectly, so directly we manage about, I want to say maybe $150,000 a month in ad spend on Facebook. And then sort of with authors we consult with, we manage about $2 million a month in ad spend. So we see at a macro level what trends are looking like. And we'll see a particular issue hit like 50% of the authors we work with, and the other 50% aren't hit by it. And then we're able to dig in and be like, why did these ads stop working and these ads kept working? And I feel like for a lot of people who are doing this at a lower scale, they just don't have that visibility. So I feel like that kind of makes us unique. I'm not saying it to say that other people shouldn't be teaching how to do ads, but I do feel like when people give advice for ads and how to do things, they should always say like, hey, it might not work in your situation. So don't be looking for a silver bullet. Don't think that just because it's worked for someone else, you should be like just dropping money like crazy on it, trying to get it work for you. Don't find another tactic, find a different teacher maybe who you resonate better with, who what they're saying makes sense to you, and try that. Don't just try to do just one thing over and over again and lose your shirt doing that. I kind of wandered off there, but something I'm passionate about.
Oh, all great. What is the biggest mistake that you see authors make in their ads? Is it maybe, like you said, listening to the wrong person, or what do you think?
I think the biggest mistake authors make of their ads is trying to find, to do Lord of the Rings reference, like one ad to rule them all. They're trying to find like the best image, primary ad copy, which is a text above the image, and then headline. They're trying to find the best possible combination that exists. And there is no best possible combination that exists. To say that there is one would mean that there's one image and text combo, so ad creative combo, that works well with all humans. And if that was the case, every single ad on television would look exactly the same, but it doesn't, because we're all different and different things appeal to all of us. We would all be wearing the same clothing if like one creative thing appealed to every single person. Different things appeal to different people. So trying to make one ad to rule them all basically means that you're just going to exclude probably the majority of your audience. And so Facebook is really good actually with their dynamic creative system of figuring out what creative they should be showing to what person. They're not perfect at it, and they do screw up sometimes. So it still takes a person, like a human, watching it to make sure that nothing goes sideways. But maybe you respond better to landscapes. Like if you show like a fantasy landscape, with a castle in the distance, you're going to buy like crazy. And if you see like a dude riding on a horse with a bow and arrow, you're like, that doesn't really move me the same way. Where someone else is like, look at his hair, or something like that. And they're like, I want to read about this guy, and so different images are going to attract different people, different color palettes, different lengths of text. Some people will not read more than 3 sentences at most in an ad. And some people would read the entire book if you put it in the copy of the ad. And so trying to find like that one combo that works for everybody is just sort of, it's futile. And it actually is impossible because we don't have enough good enough data analysis to even figure out which one is working the best. So I think sort of availing yourself of the tools that let you create of a lot of different ads to appeal to different people is the best way to go. I think that's the biggest mistake I see people make, is that they don't do that. They just are on this hunt for this one piece of creative that's going to win.
Now, you mentioned you're releasing the 4th edition of your book, which kind of lends itself to the fact that Facebook ads change a lot and what works changes a lot. And I'm curious, how do you and how can individual authors working on their own ad campaigns kind of stay on top of all of the changes that happen within the metaverse?
That's a really good question. Yeah, and it's almost to the point right now where I'm considering unpublishing the 3rd edition. It's still very good advice generally, but there are a few things in there I'm like, oh, that is like definitely wrong now. It used to be the best advice, and now it's almost detrimental. So hopefully I can get the 4th edition out pretty soon and head that off of the past, and then I will pull the 3rd edition. But yeah, the 3rd edition is only like 16 months old now, I think, or something like that from when I released it. So it's changed a lot in the last year and a half. The biggest change was this January. Facebook changed over a lot of their targeting systems in the back end to be AI powered, and their AI is not good. It's frankly downright terrible. It's getting better though. I would say actually it's gone from downright terrible to just really bad at this point. Like it used to be like it could actually, like you could run a romance ad and it would show your ads to men, like just to give you an example. It was that bad at figuring out who to show ads to. But yeah, how do you figure out how do you stay abreast of those changes? And I mean, I know one of the ways is just you can come to every Thursday at lunch, I do what I call a lunch with Mal, where I just sort of talk about things, and I'll talk about changes that are happening on Facebook and what we're seeing as a team and how to fix that. I know some other authors do similar, some other people who teach ads do similar things. They have podcasts where they're kind of keeping people abreast of what's going on. So I think it is like a continuing education thing. You have to find people in the industry that you trust and then follow them in whatever way you can to be around for when they talk about what's changed and updates. And then, like I said, hopefully, I think it'll be out this summer. The 4th edition of Help My Facebook Ads Suck is going to be free. So you can also have that as a way to figure out what's going on.
One of the things that we wanted to ask you too, because you've been in the industry for such a long time, what's the biggest change that you've seen in the indie publishing space? And do you have any predictions for where we're headed next?
Oh, the first one's a hard one, and the second part's my favorite topic. I mean, I feel like there's been so many big changes. It's almost hard. I think one of the ones I think is the nicest changes is that people are now aware of the fact that indie authors do really well or can do really well. And it's not like it used to be like a thing you would almost kind of hide, like you wouldn't tell your family what you did. And now I feel like it's gotten to the point where even if your family doesn't believe you, someone else around the table will be like, yeah, authors actually make real money. And I think that like being an author is now like a viable career choice. Like when I was a kid, and I said, I want to be an author. Everybody's like, yeah, that's great. What's your real plan for what you're going to do for a living? And now it's like, I would tell my daughter to be an author and feel comfortable that she could actually have a future and make a living, writing books and also because even though AI is becoming so prevalent, I still feel like there's always going to be a need for humans to craft things. Just like I won't go too deep into AI, but just like we have yet to still develop a machine that can crochet. There is the best a machine has ever been able to do is 5. They're not called stitches. My daughter would kill me. My daughter loves crocheting, but they can basically do 5 loops as a machine before they make a mistake. And a human can just bang out, like my daughter can crochet a hair scrunchie in 7 minutes. And we not only do we not have a machine that could do that, it's actually just like economically infeasible to ever make one to do it. And I feel like the same thing is going to be true of art. We're going to find that there's always going to be a need for artists to exist. So I think that's what it is. Like we've experienced in the last 12 years the largest boom of written creativity that humanity has ever produced. We were in the golden age of writing and of novels and storytelling. It's never been like this at any other point. We produce right now, like more books come out a month than used to come out a decade, a century ago. There's just so much out there that people can read and consume, and we can tell stories in any way we want. If you want to write stories about MMF bullfrog shifters, there's someone out there who wants to read that. Like there's like cozy mysteries with orcs and stuff like that. Like anything you want to tell, your audience is there. It might not be the biggest audience. They might be hard to reach, but they are there. You could write that story and someone would want to read it. I think that's like I think that is the biggest change. It's a creativity change and not like a marketing change. I think the marketing has changed a lot too, but I really feel like the opportunity and like the lack of stigma around writing is the biggest thing. And now I forgot the second half of the question, which is the one I really want to answer.
Where do you think the indie publishing space is heading next?
Thank you. Yes, I think that we are at the beginning of a direct sales scenario for authors. I think it was like 2 years ago at NINC, and this hopefully this isn't too apocryphal to say on this podcast, but I predicted that in 10 years the publishers and we first step was we made the publishers unnecessary, and then the next step will be I think we're going to make the retailers unnecessary, and maybe not exactly unnecessary because I still feel like there's that discoverability angle, and then perhaps retailers might move into more of a distribution system than a specific retailing system for authors, and that might be a shift that we make. And I think also retailers that make devices probably have advantages there because they might be able to tie some of that stuff together. The best device, the first waterproof e-reader was by Kobo. I think is it still the only waterproof e-reader? It might be, actually. I'm not sure about that.
I think Amazon might have one, but we do have a very nice color device right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I think that's a huge thing, right? Because e-readers are so much better to read on than a phone. They're easier on the eyes. They hurt less when you drop them on your face because they're actually lighter than a lot of phones. And if you're like me and you read in bed, you're going to drop it on your face at some point. So I think that's going to be the biggest shift, is that we're going to go to the point where authors are going to be much more in control of the sales process of their books. And they're going to be sort of relying on distribution and retailers in other ways than they used to. And I think it's a good thing though, because one of the things I don't like about the way that retail works for authors is like if I was to sell, I don't know, fingernail clippers, which I guess I'm not on video, so you can't. Not everybody can see that. I was holding up a fingernail clipper. If I sell fingernail clippers on Amazon and one of you were to buy that from me, I would get your email address. Amazon gives me this email address, but for authors, we're like this bastard stepchild of the retail world where we don't get access to our readers unless we go through Herculean efforts to build our own mailing list. And nowhere in no other industry does the person selling the thing through a retailer. Well, I guess actually that's not true. There actually are other industries, but it still feels terrible because I was actually just thinking about everybody else who sells things in physical retail stores. But nowhere else in e-commerce do the actual people making and selling the products that have such little access to the people who are actually buying it. And it makes us authors spend an inordinate amount of time and effort building newsletters. We can just communicate directly with our own readers. And that's actually the thing. To be honest, if any retailer were to give authors more direct access to their readers, I feel like they would actually have a pretty strong advantage with authors because authors could be a little bit more in control of their own destiny. Now, I know some authors are kind of crazy. I might be one of them sometimes, so I understand why there's a little bit of gatekeeping there. But at the same time, like I get really weird messages from people I buy stuff from on Amazon. So they're badly worded things asking me to, review nicely, and if there's any problems to contact them directly, and I'll go through Amazon and stuff like that. So I feel like it wouldn't be the end of the world. But yeah, I think that's the thing I see changing is that authors are going to have to do this. I also feel like a lot of authors are going to be like, dear God, no, I don't want to have to be my own retailer. And I think we might see like publishing co-ops start to appear where authors are working together, where people who are good at different parts of publishing will kind of take over those parts. And it'll be like a publisher, but instead of being like a top-down business, it'll be more like a co-op. I think those will appear too. In fact, I've already seen a number of them start to crop up.
Well, I mean, as a representative of a retailer, I think I have to say, I hope you're wrong, but I do think it's going to be really interesting to see how the direct sales boom that we are witnessing, how it continues to evolve. And I do think I was at that chat at NINC that you did a couple of years ago. I was trying to remember where. Yeah, I was trying to remember where I've seen you before, and it was at NINC. So
it got kind of acrimonious, actually. And I think like one of the things too is like I think it will change, but I don't think the retailers will go away because we still have retailers in every other industry and they can all direct sell as well. Like everyone else can direct sell whatever, but retailers still exist. So I just feel like it'll be a shift in how we work with retailers and how retailers work with writers. But I also feel like to a certain extent, like in this day and age, almost everybody that sells something, you can buy it direct from them as well as buying it from a retailer. So the retailers will have to figure out these ways to incentivize both the consumer and the seller to use them, like Amazon does right now. So it'll be interesting. It's going to make for some changes. And I think the cool thing is that it's going to involve a lot of people working in creative ways to solve problems. And hopefully it'll make it so that for readers, it's easier for us to find our book about bullfrog shifters than it is right now.
Well, I look forward to reading your book on bullfrog shifters, because I feel like that idea is planted now, and that's how you're going to spend your creative summer. But before we let you go, we would love to know anybody can write anything they want if they put their heart in it and they put their mind to it. That's my motivational speech for the day. But before we let you go, where can our listeners find you online?
Certainly. So if you're interested in my fiction, which is like it's fairly queer, it's primarily female-led sci-fi stories, you can go to aeon14.com. That's AEON14.com. That's another great marketing thing, by the way. Figure out a series name or universe name that is unique, and if someone searches for it, they're only going to find you, which I sort of lucked into. I could say I was genius when I came up with that, but I kind of lucked into it. And the other, for our consulting and advertising side of things, you can go to thewritingwives.com and find us there.
Well, we will include links to both in our show notes. And Malorie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. This has been a delight.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in picking up Mal's books, we will include links in our show notes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're looking for more tips on growing your self-publishing business, you can find us at KoboWritingLife.com. Be sure to follow us on social media. We are at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook and Twitter, and at kobo.writing.life on Instagram. This episode was hosted by Laura Granger and Rachel Wharton with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham. Our theme music is composed by Tearjerker, and thanks to Mal Cooper for being our guest. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing!